Welcome back to the Rupert and Pinchy Show. I'm Isaiah, and that's George. We appreciate your time. Please leave a like if you like this video, as well as subscribing if you enjoy it as well, and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Good morning, everyone, and how are you today, Rupert, George, whatever your
Doing
name
good.
is?
Yeah, doing good. Good morning. Um, I think I'm probably gonna have to leave the podcast because I'm gonna take a job as a meteorologist because I think that is like the best job. On my phone it said, um, in the weather it said snow is possible.
Whoa.
I'm like, you know what? I can do that. I can go like meteors are possible, flying monkeys are possible.
Is that possible? Maybe it's possible.
It is possible. Is
It's
it
not
probable?
probable? No.
No. So so the non-committal that actually, what would you think about if we converted our Rupert and Pinchy show to a meteorologist show, and maybe we could even get paid high dollars from the climate um, um,
People.
what would I say, climate people, to help because we can go on and say climate disaster
It's possible.
is possible today.
Well, we could also start a channel that's about the return of Christ, and we'd say Christ could return today, or
Yeah, it's
tomorrow,
possible.
or the next
Mm-hmm.
day, or the
Mm-hmm.
next day after that,
Mm-hmm.
and we would never be wrong.
Right. Correct. Now, someone with more knowledge and understanding might say, "Well, on one side, you're correct that it is possible you could return today, but there are certain things that have been prophesied or that many believe are prophesied, and some view it differently. But but everyone views that certain things need to occur first, and uh, so
Right. Well, I mean,
now,
there are some signs that have occurred already, but they're not necessarily meaning it's happening now, but they're signs of the fact that it will happen eventually. Um, but to a certain extent, we aren't knowledgeable enough about prophecy to really say for sure this hasn't been fulfilled yet. What I mean by that is we won't know until it's revealed that it's happened. Like, for instance, the part where it says that Rachel cried for her children or whatever. Nobody would have even after it was fulfilled, people would probably not necessarily connect that with what happened. But then somebody
yeah,
comes along who can interpret prophecy and then says this is what it means. So even after the fact, it was less than clear.
right. And you're talking about when in Jeremiah, when it's prophesied in Jeremiah, and then however many hundred years later, it happens in Bethlehem and around Judea, where um, Herod sends and kills all the people. So yeah, and on
Well,
top of that,
all the
so
children,
yeah,
not
all
all the people.
the 40 innocents. Um,
40?
yeah, I
Why
think
40?
that there's a reason, but I think it's a person could just say the innocent children, but I think there's been the number 40 brought up
Oh, I haven't heard
somewhere.
that. Interesting.
Yeah, but coming back to our today, like you said, besides prophecy, most oftentimes is not understood until after its fulfillment. Um, uh, Things could be going on right now, and we're not aware of it.
Right.
So we're not aware of all the events going around the world. We're not aware of what's being spoken in dark chambers. we're not aware of all the intricacies and interconnectedness of certain things that actually might qualify for the fulfillment of an event or a prophecy about the end times. One thing I think that we could say is, is that when it says that this gospel shall be preached into all the world, and then the end shall come. Now, sometimes, again, we as humans, we make so many mistakes because we like things neat and tidy.
Right.
When it says that, as if the Lord doesn't like him neat and tidy, but his understanding of neat and tidy is a lot different than sometimes our understanding of neat and tidy. Ours had more to do with wanting to control neat and tidy. But coming back to the gospel, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached and to all the world, and then the end shall come. So we go, okay, on the day that the
Right.
gospel is preached, then the end's going to come right now. It's like, really, that leaves open that this first has to happen, and then the end shall come in 100 years,
Right.
or 1,000 years, or in 2 months. But it generally would be closer to when that fulfillment happened. But I would say that that is something that I would. I don't know if it's your opinion, but it's my opinion that that has been fulfilled in spades.
So here's a couple of thoughts. I heard somebody bring up this idea the other day about the idea that the signs of Christ coming are not necessarily to say this is the exact time that Christ is coming back, but that the signs are more indicators that it's true, that that there is a day that it ends, or there is an end to this world, and that there is a time that Christ is coming back. And so it would be, let me put it this way, it'd be like how there's miracles that accompany the words of Jesus, right? It's pointers to the reality of who he is, or in this case, it would be signs that point to the fact that he really is going to come back eventually, even if it's another 2,000 years, 4,000 years. To God, a day is like 1,000, or 1,000. Both ways, a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years is like a day to God. And so it's not necessarily saying this is the exact time that he's doing it. But yeah, I mean, I think that it would mean that it's more likely going to happen soon, rather than later, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. But then on the other hand, the other thing that you were saying, oh goodness, why did I go blank with it? Oh yeah, going to all the nations. I think that it's possible. I think that it's not necessarily the case, because I don't know how many people are supposed to hear about it before the end comes. Are there 5 people somewhere on some deserted island? Maybe. So I would say likely yes, it appears to be fulfilled. But I think on the other hand, there is a possibility that it hasn't quite, but I think it likely has.
Well, and also, I would say that, okay, I think it has by broadcast. I mean, I think it has been spoken everywhere. And like you said, there might be, there might be 5 or 10 people, or even 100 people, or even 1,000 people that never heard. If that's the case, God is always faithful, and he's not like, oh, in the councils of heaven. All right, so has everyone heard? Yeah, everyone. There's a couple that we missed. All right, don't worry about them. I don't care what happens with them. That's what. No, he will make it clear to them in some manner. We can have confidence or that God is loving and faithful, and so how he does that, that's God. But but in general, like you said, I think if it's like when the scripture says, "And all Israel, followed Moses." Well,
Not really.
probably there are some that maybe went along and did the motions, but they weren't really keen on following him and had every indication to try to usurp his authority or whatever. But so all, you know, is a interesting term. But so that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that is it readily available? And I would say that is probably even more true, or absolutely true. Now, it's not maybe available to someone in some forest somewhere that doesn't have internet, but that is shrinking far, more and more and more. We see pictures all the time of these explorers going like into some jungle somewhere, and the natives have a cell phone, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And, so I do think the gospel has been preached to all the nations, but I also think it's readily available to anyone that wants to. And
Right. Well, one could compare it to the idea of law that Thomas Aquinas talks about law being propagated.
correct.
And so it could be similar to that, where we see that it's readily available. That's kind of the idea of propagation. And so propagation includes availability, and also it includes the distance in which it is shared as well. And so I think that you use both pretty well there in your consideration of it. And I think that based on that, the conjunction of the two, availability and how much it's spread, I think both do point to the idea that it has been spread to all nations.
Yeah. Well,
and that it is all over.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, a very important point, and that is, that propagation. And when Pinchy's bringing that up, we've had other episodes on defining law, and other podcasts have done an excellent job on talking about that. But for a law to be just, or it needs first it needs to apply to the people for their benefit. And it needs to be, presented by he who has authority, the ruler of those people, and it needs to be propagated, right? So, and that's what's really neat about the natural law, which the basic premise is to do good, seek the good, and avoid evil. And then right from there, that every creature, every human, male and female, has been given by God, because of the way he created them, that natural law, that their reason and intellect can discern that they should seek the good and avoid the evil. And really close to that, and whenever a foundational law is your foundation, from there you might have other laws that come into play. And so one of those laws that come into play really quickly after that is that we could actually posit that the law of do not murder is known by every person. And so God, the way he created us, has propagated that law that every person instinctively knows that it's wrong to kill another person, to murder another person. And when we say kill another person, we're talking about from a malicious intent, not from a self-defense type of situation. And so that propagation, God has perfectly done into all. And then someone will say, well, no, because that's why Moses, had that in the law. It's like in the Ten Commandments. It's like, no, Moses's 10 Commandments, or the Lord's 10 Commandments, was a reiteration of what was already in the heart that people could know by their reason and intellect. And God was just like making it even clearer,
Right.
right? I have it now in writing for you, and I have it in your heart for you. And so, so if there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit here in Altoona, Wisconsin, where I live, on 7th Street, people in Indiana or people in where Z lives in Minnesota, they might not know that law,
Right.
right? On that street is 30-mile-an-hour speed limit law. And guess what? They're not really required to know it. If they were required to know it, then there would be some method involved with letting you know. Can you imagine if we had to know every law? How big our libraries at home would have to be?
Oh, seriously.
Hey, I'm going. Yeah. So, for salvation, just so everyone is pretty calm and relaxed, you don't need to know about that 30-mile-an-hour speed limit law in Altoona. But if there's something that God requires for salvation, then we do have to know that. And God has promised that he will make it known. And so one of those ways, or one of those things, is like what you're talking about, is the fact that the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the nations,
Right.
and then the end shall come. So,
Well, something that you were talking about, and it reminded me of in Romans, where Paul talks about all kinds of sinfulness that the Gentiles participated in, and he makes some statements about the attributes of God are clearly known by the world, by nature. And that reminded me of what you were talking about, because it seems to be indicated by what Paul is pointing out in Romans that the Ten Commandments, including knowing God and not bowing before animals, as he describes in Romans, is clearly available to all men. And so it seems that he is indicating that the Ten Commandments are known by all, or can be known by all men. And so I think that would reiterate your point of saying that it's just a reestablishment of what is already true. And another example of that is the law given to Noah of if a man is killed by another man, that man should be killed. Well, yeah, that's a new law. Like, let's say, like God is commanding it, but it was already known by man at that point. But then it furthers the point. God is furthering or reiterating the same point, and he brings it into fuller light as because of man, all of human sorry, all of human society had to die, and all of the animals had to die, and basically the earth had to die, and so now this is the law. And he's giving further reasons why this law is reasonable to expect. I don't know if that makes sense when what I'm drawing there. I think that God's point to Noah about what this law is in response to is an attempt, or him reinforcing the law, the natural law.
Yeah,
by giving
so
further reasoning.
Well, and okay, so you said further reasoning, but I want to I would suggest that he doesn't give much reasoning at all, but he states it so it's written, or so it's known verbally and on writing. So you could say that's reasoning. What I mean is by that is what you reference there is really great in Genesis there, where it talks when, if any human is killed by another human, that a human shall die at the hands of another human. And then it also talks about, and it includes the animals there. If the animals kill a human, then the animals are to die. That animal is to die at the hands of a human. So what's interesting, he doesn't go into like a treatise on natural law with with
Right.
Noah. Why? Because he knows it.
Yeah.
As soon as God says you shall not, commit murder, unless you're insane or physically or mentally incapable of understanding, when someone says thou shalt not murder, everyone can go, it can register right away. They know that's true. Now, they might murder, they might want to murder, and they might commit murders. But as far as it being right or wrong, they know without having to go into a lot of explanation. So if a normal person, if you told a normal person, let's do it on a simpler scale. If you told a normal person, thou shalt not cut off your neighbor's right hand, how much more explanation does that need? I mean, what person, if you told that to neighbors, if there needed to be a law like that, because that was running rampant in some country where all the right hands were missing. Anyway, if someone said, they're in school, they're in the catechism class of whatever nation and religion that is, not to cut the right hand off, what normal person isn't expecting someone to raise their hand? Mr. Teacher, why shouldn't we cut it off? What would the teacher have to respond to that? What would be, what more could they say? Obviously that person, that if they're intelligent and they're not hampered by insanity or mental incapacity, obviously that person just wants to argue against it. First the teacher might have to go like, do you agree that that's a bad thing? And if the student says won't even agree, then that it's bad, then the teacher's going to go like, well, okay, I know he knows it's wrong, but he's asking why is it wrong? So, in a certain universe, and maybe on a certain Earth, it'd have been great if the teacher said, well, I'll show you why. Walks up to the student, cuts off the right hand. Do you understand now why it's maybe a bad idea? It shouldn't take that, right?
Right.
And so when anybody hears thou shalt not, slap your neighbor in the face for no reason, there might be a reason, and that's a different situation.
Right.
But just, when they're, we know these things without explanation.
Right. Well,
and when someone asks for an explanation, they want to avoid being under the law. They want to avoid being accountable.
Right. Well, and what you're talking about illustrates the reason why pure skepticism is an absurd way of looking at the world. Because if we're going to be skeptical about every little thing, it's unreasonable. Because then we're going to come up with absurd conclusions like it's okay to cut off your arm. And here's the thing, that's where pure skepticism leads. Actually, that's why I don't think you can actually live that way, because the conclusion of that is the value of the human person is not real, murder is okay, and there's no such thing as evil, and there's no such thing as good. These are all results of pure skepticism. And so living in the world becomes impossible because they're ignoring the natural law, and instead they make their own law that is contrary to it. And it's reasonable to want to know, why is it wrong to run into the street? Like, why shouldn't I do that? But as a child, your first experience of that is your father saying, "Don't do it." That's your
Right.
first. But then afterwards comes understanding. We've talked about this many times. That's what is required, or that is what is required of us. Is
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's act first, ask questions later. Um, but it's all based on the faithfulness of God, who He is. He's not going to tell us to do something that is evil. And so, when we listen to His voice, it's reasonable to listen to His voice. And then afterwards, we can ask Him, why did such and such happen? Or why such and such? And so, it's that's just the principle of how we live. And Nietzsche really, the philosopher, really hated this idea. This is what he hated most about Christianity, as far as I can tell, is that it's based on trust and faith, and he thought that that's slave mentality. But the opposite, or the alternative way of living is through power and domination, and through trusting oneself instead of trusting the God who is trustworthy. And so, um, Nietzscheism, or whatever you want to call it, is probably one of the worst ways to live possible. And that's, I actually have an issue with his, what would you call it? What's the opposite of slave? His master mentality. I have a problem with his master mentality. But
Well, to
anyway, I don't need to go
well,
that way.
yeah, Nietzsche's God was freedom, freedom from all rule, and so whereas if his God would have been truth, then he would see that freedom serves truth, not the other way around. And but coming back to your skepticism, um, and we've talked about this in other podcasts too in a different way, but it's um, right now in Haiti, um, there is bloodshed and gangs are fighting for power. The government has lost authority, and so there's a lot of bloodshed, violence, mayhem, fear, terror for those people living there. Some are the victims, some are the perpetrators, some are perpetrators and victims at the same time. Um, uh, but in that society, guess what? Right now, you will not find one skeptic. Right?
Right.
Skepticism does not live very well in reality. Although that's a very violent reality right now, but
Yeah.
it's showing the reality of life and death, of cause and effect, of what happens when wickedness and righteousness conflict. There's a battle, and so if there was a skeptic in Haiti, then even though we don't have doctorate degrees in psychiatry, we are speculative doctors of psychiatry, Pinchy and I. We would deem that person legally insane. Okay, if there was a skeptic in Haiti, we would just from here we would diagnose him with with absolute insanity.
Legal
Okay,
insanity.
legal insanity. Let's come to our country. There are skeptics. And guess why they're skeptics? Because they have Twinkies in the freezer. They have hamburger in
Twinkies
the
specifically.
refrigerator. They have milk. They have water. They have internet. They have TV. They have comfort. Maybe not all comfort, but they have a place to stay, somewhere to sleep. And they're thinking about, I don't think there's anything really real about this. Why can they? I would not call that person insane. I would call that person just bloated with opulence and not not having to deal with reality. And then that scripture comes really true. It says, "Let their table become a snare for them." In the times of comfort, comfort can become a snare for us to forget that, oh, you're going to die. There's eternity,
Mhm.
and there's something past this. And so,
Yeah.
I was just thinking how interesting that, again, it just shows that bad philosophy, of the 16th and 17th and 18th century, and even now today, bad philosophy, and there's a lot of it. And that's not to say that Nietzsche is an ignorant person. He's a brilliant person.
Yeah,
Uh,
he was.
he's brilliant. So intermixed with his nihilism and his absolute antichrist, there were some things in it that he was very smart on and very logical on. But
But
it's
that's
only
one of the problems with Nietzsche, is how
yeah,
logical he was.
right. Well, and I'm just saying that when we have comfort is when stupid ideas come. you know, uh, they come in hard times as well, but
Well,
it's when we
sorry.
yeah.
I
No,
was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, not to pick on any particular group, but I think I could say this. The reason why flat Earth is more of an idea now than it ever has been in history is
Right.
because of that truth. I think.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point because if you go and study the flat Earth uh, philosophy or whatever, that is more of a modern invention. The ancients all understood of the spherical nature of the world.
Yeah.
And it was the outliers, even then, that if there was any that were flat earthers, um, they were the non-intellectual, and I'm not talking about elitist versus non-elitist. I'm talking about those who did not take any time to study basics, um, or possibly weren't capable. They were the flat earthers, but those who knew had already decided. So in our modern day, there is a group that very small group of flat earthers. I give them one bit of credit. Uh, uh, this is, and tell me what you think about this. They're skeptical of the powers that be. And so I understand their skepticism
Right. Yeah. No,
because,
I totally agree with that.
yeah, because we are lied to all the time. We are lied to, well, we're lied to by every sort of person. We're lied to by the religious people. We're lied to by the political people. We're lied to by the science people. Not all of them, but uh, we are been lied to by so many of those groups. So then, when they're exposed, it makes you doubt everything else, and so then you become a skeptic, and you go like, "Okay, I'm going with the flat Earth and the moon is cheese thing because I don't believe anything." you know.
Right. Well,
Um,
let me put it in perspective. Um, well, okay, I have two thoughts. One is the perspective thing that I just said is, um, I watched Trent Horn talk about the resurrection. I think it was an argument or a debate. Um, and he was saying that 2% of the population um of Earth um lived before the time of Christ, and that 98% lived after Christ. Okay, now 300 years before Christ, they discovered that the Earth was round. So that means that like less than 2% historically had said that the Earth was flat, because it is true that a lot of the ancient mind did think of the Earth as flat before the time of whoever discovered that the Earth was round, based on calculations. It's true, but that means that less than 2% of people historically thought that the Earth was flat, and then now I don't know what the percentage is, but um, that means that there's 98%. Oh, sorry, how would I put it? that means that there has to be more people that have believed that the Earth is flat since the time of Christ than before. Anyway,
Because
that's
there's more people.
right. I think that would follow. But then the other thing that I was going to say is the difference between the Earth being flat and other theories or conspiracy theories is the fact that the conspiracy theory that let's say that the moon landing was fake does not have 2,300 years of history or 2,600 years of history, whereas the Earth being spherical has that itinerary, and so it's less reasonable compared to other things, other conspiracy theories.
Well, and if and we should actually when we have an opportunity is keep the country of Haiti in our prayers because it's such a terrible. But if you and me, Z, were to take a camera and a mic and go man on the street in Haiti and go like, "Hey, we just want to ask you a question." Yeah, what? And they're looking over their shoulder, one of them gonna be, "Do you think the Earth is flat or round?" They would look at me like, "What in the H is wrong with you?"
Right.
And they might just cut. They might just shoot us right then. It's like we don't care because it's. But again, where is flat Earth? It's in the comfort of the basement of our moms. Where we're living and on the internet and just delving into it strongly. And it's like, so, yeah, I don't know where you were gonna
Yeah,
brought
I'm
in
not sure.
flat.
The reason why I brought up the flat Earth thing was to talk about the fact that these ideas happen in comfort and that skepticism does. And I think that living in a skeptical way just undermines everything. And I think we've reiterated that point pretty well. How did we even get here?
Well, I'm
Before
going to
that,
circle this back because I know we're going to go, but you bring up an excellent point, and no one lives their life in a skeptical manner. And there are a few that do, but that would probably be a psychiatric. That would probably have a psychiatric diagnosis for, And there are some people that maybe live in that fear. But thinking of a child from the time they're born, you know, if they were raised skeptically or they were a skeptic, it's like, hey, your dad said that you can't. My dad, who's my dad? Well, that guy over there. I'm not so sure. I mean, and that's the same way with trust and faith. A lot of times the atheist or the agnostic will say that it's it's not, faith is not reasonable, and you start to go like, you don't live your life like that.
right,
Well, what do you mean? You carry on your whole life as if there's such a thing as trust. That being a human trust or a worldly trust, but still the idea that there's something, for some reason, you're trusting so many things. You're trusting your girlfriend, you're trusting your husband, you're trusting your wife, you're trusting your school, you're trusting, we're trusting so many times, and all those trusts, we all during the time, all through our lives, we realize that sometimes that trust is going to be violated or not, or compromised. But that being said, we don't throw out trust and faith completely because of those cases where it's abused or we're taken advantage of. No, because then there would be no point in living. How could you even, where would you even go? So you bringing up the fact that you can't live a life as skeptic. The only way you can is if you live in a comfortable place that will give you food and lodging and electricity and all this stuff while you go and figure out your multiple complex charts of why the earth is flat and whatever else you might come to. But how we got here and talking about we were talking about, you brought up the signs of the time and Christ coming back. And so the scripture says that there's a point where it says that, yeah, you guys have been talking about Christ coming back for so long, but as long as the earth has been, this is what's been going on forever and ever. And there's no, and they fail to see that there have been changes along the way and progression. Of it seems like almost like you could say life on earth is like a child that was born and then is coming into adulthood and then middle age. There's some maturity of this process that we call earth and culture that seems to be coming to a climax of some sort. And
Right.
and we've right.
Yeah, it seems to be leading that way, and I think there's two things that I think seem to be indicated by Scripture that will happen. We've already talked about one, or there's probably multiple, but two that are biggest in my mind is one, the gospel will be spread all over, and that's absolutely true that it's been being spread. But then the other thing is, evil will grow to its full extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I also see that that's kind of been happening. Not necessarily all at once. I don't think we're at that point where it's completely beyond control, out of control. But I think that the philosophical structures and the life and prosperity and just the way that things are set up is, if we fail, we will fail miserably, because the world is as connected as ever. There's only a couple countries that actually ban abortion, and there's only a couple of good countries left, and that's an issue, because that means that if we fall, then we all fall, basically. And so I would say that there seems to be a build-up towards that part happening as well. And I don't know if that makes sense. I just see,
Yeah, it
I
does.
see both of those things occurring.
Well, and what you see is what occurred to me as you're saying that. You talked about 98% of the world believes in the round Earth, and 2% might believe in a flat Earth. You
Well,
didn't say that
historically.
strictly. Yeah, you weren't saying that strictly, because I think it's probably even less than 2% believe in a flat. But now, but there are, but now it's kind of the reverse. Now it's the 2% that are adhering to reality.
And other matters, I mean,
in when you're talking about the nations, that there's two nations that don't allow abortion, out of all the nations. So now we've got a few number believing in common sense and what is obvious, and the rest of them throwing it out to the wind, and so it's kind of a reverse of that situation where, because many times it is true that the world will have a good idea in general of a certain truth, but there are times when the world will flip,
right,
and have that it's going to be the few that see reality for what it is. And so you talked about one of the signs of the coming, or things that have to occur first before Christ returns, and was the preaching of the gospel. The other thing it says in Thessalonians, it says, and you mentioned that it seems like evil is getting worse, or more prevalent, or more chaotic,
or more possible, maybe, is another way of thinking about it.
Well, and more possible. And then also, it talks about that that there's somebody restraining wickedness, so it doesn't just totally flood us, or flood the world. There's something restraining, and we're not going to talk about who the restrainer is. We're not going to go into that. Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it the church? Is it? But somebody is
right. Somebody is.
somebody or someone or something is restraining. And I was thinking, you know, how many times you and I have talked about, we're so glad that most atheists don't take their atheism to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because and some of that is because it just doesn't work, right? Because, you know, it will end in chaos. But what if it does seem like there's a lot of atheistic control over academia, politics, um, and and if it's not absolute atheism, is absolute what they call the nuns. They have no religious affiliation. They don't really care. It's living for the now. That's, you know, de facto living kind of an atheistic life in a sense. And now atheists are going to get all mad at us.
As always.
Because I
Surprise.
said that. But um, but maybe some of that uh, uh, when that person who is restraining evil and not letting keeping it in check to a certain degree is that keeping that atheistic mindset in check. But now most of that atheistic mindset is in control of so many things in the world. And whereas most of the world is not atheist, that's what's so odd. You know, it's like 5% of the world, uh, 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 roughly around 5% are atheists. And yet they have so much control over so many things right now. And that control will affect laws, common law. It'll affect attitudes. It breeds into the idea of that's why you can redefine what reality is. You can redefine what a woman is. You can redefine what a man is, because reality, there's no such thing as reality. It's like it's power makes right. Whatever you think goes. What you conceive in your mind is true, and you can blaze your own trail. And so maybe that is the next thing that we could say we see. I don't see the world as over atheistic, but I see the control centers and what is being legislated and taught as very atheistic. So, and that's going to have fruit. That's going to give fruit, and it's giving fruit now, right?
Yeah. Well, and um I'm gonna be careful when I say this. I'm not saying that all atheists are like this, but I'm
Right.
saying that this provides an opportunity for people like Hitler, because his mentality or view of the world, um very atheistic, and um I think that it logically follows from the belief that human beings are not actually special, because there is no specific human nature or human dignity other than they're
Mm-hmm.
smart. But then again, what happens when oh, well, actually, I think that adds further to my point, because what Hitler did is, um with certain groups of individuals, he portrayed them as less intelligent or less human than other ones. And so in order for him to get his way, he actually limited the care, or limited, how am I trying to, there are some atheists that say human beings are more intelligent than other animals. If intelligence is your basis, then when you find that a certain group is less intelligent than others, then that gives you a so-called right
To
in
do whatever you want
to
to.
do whatever you want. And so, when you look at it that way, um, it's very dangerous. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very terrible place to be, and that's what can happen in a very atheistic world. Again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that all atheists are Hitler, but what I'm saying
Right.
is, these ideas can create the possibility of people like Hitler, to be in power and to act in this way.
Well, and then the atheist would argue with you and say, and I would say that not that they have a fair point, but but it should be addressed. Is like they'll say, well, yeah, but Hitler was a Christian. It's like, okay, so that requires
Wow.
more. That requires more study, and it may be true that Hitler took certain Christian thought or certain voices in Christianity and took and misconstrued that or took it to its logical conclusions, because not all Christian thought is founded in Christianity,
Right.
which seems like a a conundrum or paradox, but it's true. But he also highly valued Charles Darwin, and which is not a religious foundation, but anti-God foundation. And he took Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and saw her, and she's an atheist. Sorry, atheists out there. It's just that's one of your honorary members. Took her philosophy to its conclusion. Jumping to something I want you to think about, maybe we can have a show on, is that it almost seems like in the Old Testament where God stopped the Tower of Babel and being built, and that would be really fun. God was not afraid of them building up into the clouds. So what was God thwarting at that point? But I almost feel like God has now said, okay, now it's time. Let the Tower of Babel be built so that I can destroy it. It almost seems like we have a new Tower of Babel being built.
Well, I've thought about that a lot, actually.
With transhumanism and all the different things that we can create our own reality. We can create, human existence is evolving to the transcendent. On our own, we're going to merge human and machine, and all the different things. But this all points back to some things that we were talking about in the beginning. These are all signs of the time, and Jesus himself said that we should be able to understand the signs. Sometimes we can draw too many conclusions,
Right.
The first Christians did kind of think that Jesus was coming back anytime. And
that's always seemed to be the case, where Christians were like, now is the end, or the end is now.
Yeah, the end is now. I would like to say that I think that whenever the Lord does come back, I think it's going to surprise Christian and non-Christian alike. We're going to be like, wow. If you want to look at what the second coming of Christ would be like, we have some very good things to look to kind of see what it's going to be like. It'd be a lot like the first coming, wouldn't it? In some ways. And what I mean by that is for 30 years, which is, for us, we might think that's a long time, but it's really not that long. But, Jesus was born, and then he had a ministry of 3 years, and his disciples watched him, and they were all excited, and they didn't read all the signs of what he was talking about, that he was going to be flogged and killed and all these things. And then he was killed and crucified, and maybe no one except maybe the Blessed Mother, maybe John, no one really knew what's going to happen next. But in 3 short days, he appeared, right? And so I think you could understand the second coming by the first coming can tell us a lot. But there's also something very similar to the second coming, and that's the Garden of Eden, the creation of the Garden of Eden. Very similar things there, a kingdom being established, and so anyway, with that being said, I don't know if we've come to a conclusion, Z, or do you have anything more to say?
No, I feel pretty comfortable with that.
Okay.
Thank you guys for joining us. As
Yep.
always, we appreciate
Yep.
your time.
Yeah, and we're as you've if you do take the time to listen to us, we really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And as you have taken the time to listen to us, you realize that we're not so structured to present doctrine and dogma, although we don't hide from doing that per se, but that is not really our goal to do that. In a sense, we're more about having a discussion about those things that really matter to us, and having an open discussion between one another, and hopefully drawing your thoughts into that discussion, and so that it helps you come to faith if you're not of the faith, or helps you appreciate your faith more and delve deeper into it, and so the discussion day, we were all over. We went from skepticism to Haiti to God is dead. Who's that guy? Nietzsche. And so we do really appreciate it, and we hope it's been a blessing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny because in the middle of our conversations, we were all of a sudden like, how did we get here? and
yeah,
that's what it always feels like by the end. But we appreciate you guys joining us along the journey. And that's always been kind of what I want people to get from this is, even if you don't agree with everything we've said, or you don't get out of it what we want you to get out of it, at least you're thinking about these things, and we hope that you guys appreciate that.
yeah, and Isaiah Pitchy is a very logically based person, and
I hope so.
and it's yeah, and so am I. And so when we present something, we have a desire to follow a logical progression, and present a coherent, cogent, basis of what we're saying, with a premise, some evidence of that premise, and then some conclusion. But we go out on the limb here a little bit to go like,
A little
as
bit.
much as we'd like to do that in a very methodical and conscious manner, we set that aside in order to have a free conversation. And if someone listens to us and they think, boy, those people are scattered, they need to be on some kind of medication, they
You're
might not
probably
realize
right.
yeah, we might be on medication, and that might be the problem. But you don't know that. So that being said, we do really appreciate it. Z, appreciate your time. And
Thanks
as
a lot.
always, Godspeed.
Have a good week.